If there is one surah that builds the foundation of a Muslim's life, this is it. Every law, every command, every test, it's all here. It's like a roadmap from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every believer. Assalamu alaikum. Let's discuss the second surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah. Baqarah means the cow. It's a Madani surah and the revelation order is 87. Now, of course, this surah spans out into the third juz, or the third part of the Quran. We're going to talk about first the topics in part 1. So 5 key themes discussed in this surah. First of all, 3 types of people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about 3 types of people and he defines what are their characteristics. Mu'mineen, the believers, munafiqeen, the hypocrites, and kafirin, the disbelievers. So if you talk about the believers, they believe in the unseen. They believe in the unseen, establish prayers. In fact, they spend money for the good cause, and they believe in the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they believe in the last day. The second type of people was the hypocrites, the munafiqeen, and their characteristics include they tell lies, they deceive others, they have the disease of the heart, they lack knowledge, they act with stupidity, they make fun of the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are ignorant and they argue and create fights. The third one is the kafirin, which are the disbelievers, and Allah has basically, numbed their hearts, their ears, and their eyes to the reality. Going further, this surah talks about the miracles of the Quran, which is haruf muqatta'at, the disjointed letters that appear in the beginning of some surahs. Those letters are also miracles of Allah. Majority of the Sahaba had the consensus that the meaning of these letters are only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second one is the open challenge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to mankind and jinn to unanimously create a surah or even a verse or even a word like the one in the Quran, and they could not even bring a single word like that. Then this surah talks about the creation of Adam alayhi salam and the mention of Iblis, making Adam alayhi salam the Khalifa, angels telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that humans will create corruption, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then telling angels that their knowledge is limited. Then of course the prostration of angels to Adam alayhi salam and the denial of shaitan, the denial of Iblis, and then shaitan tempting Adam alayhi salam and Hazrat Hawa in paradise, then eventually the sending of Adam alayhi salam to the earth. Then it talks about the condition of Bani Israel, great blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Bani Israel, including freedom from Pharaoh, mano salwa, which was the miraculous food that came from the sky. They were granted with many wells for water. Despite these blessings, they were unthankful. And then the torment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that came upon them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them not to hunt on Saturdays, but they refused. The torment that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned them into monkeys. Then the name is on the story of the cow. The story of cow goes something like this. Someone died and people were unable to find who the killer was. They asked Musa alayhi salam to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about the killer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed them to slaughter a cow and then touch its meat to the dead, and the dead itself will tell you who killed him. The people actually started asking questions instead of actually being obedient and following what was being told to them. They started asking questions on what type should the cow be, what should be the condition of the cow, until eventually finding the cow. Then the surah mentions about the Haroot and Maroot, the 2 angels who were sent to test people. So people were actually learning ways to create disputes amongst husband and wife. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here that magic can create separation, but it cannot harm anyone without the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the last theme for the first part, Alif Lam Mim, is story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, which mentions how he built the Kaaba, the house of God, with his son Ismail, and then asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for acceptance and repentance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surah continues into the second juz, Sayaqul, and the topics mentioned there are change of Qibla. So interesting, roughly about 16 to 17 months after migrating to Medina, Prophet ﷺ was praying facing towards Bayt al-Muqaddas, the old Qibla. And one day, Prophet ﷺ prayed Asr facing the Kaaba in Mecca. And after this, one of the companions saw some people in the mosque, some people in the masjid praying towards Bayt al-Muqaddas, and he told them that I make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala my witness. I prayed with Prophet ﷺ facing the Kaaba. They changed their direction towards Kaaba, towards Mecca during the prayer. And this masjid is known today as Masjid-e-Qiblatain. So it had 2 Qibla. The surah talks about Ayat Bir and Abwab Bir. Ayat is the verse. Bir is a good deed. So it talks about some of those. So Ayat Bir is verse 177 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Okay, and Bir means any good deed or virtue, and it includes the following: faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hereafter, angels, books, and prophets. And good deeds mentions the fulfilling the rights of fellow human beings, by having mercy and sympathy towards them, and by actually spending on them for the sake of Allah. Remember, the spending is not for any praise. Spending is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fulfilling the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through prayers, salah and obligatory charity like zakat, and fulfilling and honoring human relationships, including the type of social contracts and businesses. And it talks about patience, that in times of misfortune, adversity and danger, one should be reverting to Allah, and one should be patient. And then Abwab Bir are the doors of good deeds. It talks about Safa Marwa, which are the two signs of Allah. And Mushrikeen used to do the sa'i even back in at that time between the hills of Safa and Marwa with their idols. Muslims thought that this is to actually praise the idols, but a verse was revealed that these hills are from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so Muslims could do sa'i as well. Then it mentions avoiding the haram things, and there's a list of things that we are supposed to avoid, including the meat of dead animal, blood, pig, and any animal that has been slaughtered other than the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alcohol we are supposed to avoid. Gambling is something we are supposed to avoid as well. Then it talks about the inheritance, and and the instruction that we should write it if we owe something or someone owes us anything. Then it talks about fasting and saving oneself from the haram things. And then it mentions about the dates of the moon, the lunar cycle, the lunar calendar. And Prophet ﷺ was asked why the moon keeps changing the shape while the sun stays the same. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a verse stating that Allah has kept an indication of time in it. And then, it talks about the jihad and hajj and infaq fi sabilillah, which is to infaq means to spend, and fi sabilillah means for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relates this infaq fi sabilillah spending to example that one seed produces 700 seeds. Condition is that when you spend, don't praise or harm someone in any way, and don't feel proud about it. You can lose the benefit. And then it mentions the migration, the hijrah. It talks about the interest and avoiding marriage with a mushrik. It further goes on, and menses are being mentioned, in this surah, and there's a topic about swearing between spouses that has been mentioned, and it means that not to go close to his wife. The Sharia swear is for 4 months. Discussed in the context of marriage. Divorce has been mentioned, and Iddah, which is the waiting period, has been mentioned, and the 5 types of women have been mentioned for regarding the Iddah duration. So the one which is there's no Iddah for someone who did the nikah but there was no intercourse. Then there is 3 menses for someone who is given divorce by the husband. Then there is Iddah for 4 months and 10 days for someone whose husband dies. And then there is for 3 months for someone who don't get menses after menopause. And there is no specific period in a case where she's pregnant, and that is the duration of the pregnancy. Then it talks about the breastfeeding, that the age is 2 years, or it can be less than that with the right consultation, and husband should be the one bearing the expense until 2 years. Then it talks about the haq mahar. What is the condition if haq mahar is decided, but divorce is given. And then it mentions the disease sent down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there were these people who escaped a town due to the fear of death. And due to the fear of death, or in some narrations due to a contagious disease sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave death to all of them. And then Prophet Hizqeel alayhi salam from the nation of Bani Israel prayed for them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised the dead to life again. And then it mentions about the story of Taloot, who was made the king of Bani Israel, who was given to them after their supplication. Prophet Dawood alayhi salam was part of Taloot group and killed Jalut. The third part, Tilka Rusul, and the surah continues into there, and the topics mentioned in there are Ayat al Kursi and Ayat al Dayn. Ayat al Kursi, of course, regarded as the most superior verse of the Quran, mentioned in Sahih Muslim 810. It's the verse 255 of Surah Baqarah, and Allah's name is mentioned 17 times. Ayat al Dayn is verse 82 of Surah Baqarah, and it's the longest verse in the Quran, and provides detailed instructions on documenting loans and debts to ensure fairness and transparency. Derived from the word dayn, literal meaning is of loan, and one should follow the guidance on loan as mentioned here. Ideally the amount, the date and time, and make some witnesses while you are taking or giving back the loan. So technically the concept of invoice in today's terms. Guidance on trading, has been mentioned here. And then Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and Uzair alayhi salam are mentioned. Interesting thing about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was the argument who claimed that even he can give life and death. Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam said, "My Lord raises the sun from the east. Can you raise it from the west?" Namrud was speechless. Prophet Uzair alayhi salam, he was dead for 100 years, and he was then brought to life again. Then it talks about sadaqah and interest. Interesting thing is sadaqah, giving it may seem to reduce the wealth. but in reality, it increases your wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that He will increase sadaqah, meaning that the wealth of the one doing it will be multiplied. And interest, taking it, may seem to increase your wealth, but in reality, it decreases it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that He will remove interest. Last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, very commonly talked about, Prophet ﷺ said that whoever recites the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah at night, it will suffice him. Mentioned in Bukhari 5009. That is it for Surah Al-Baqarah, and see you around in the next surah, Surah Al-Imran. Assalamu alaikum.